Hi everyone, David Aragona and Craig Milkowski here, taking a look at one of the graded stakes on Saturday at Tampa Bay Downs. It is race 9, the grade 2 Hillsborough Stakes, going a mile and an eighth on the turf course for fillies and mares. And Craig, sometimes at this time of year, these races come up as grade 2 events and we say, oh, they're kind of soft grade 2s. That's not the case in this race. Only 7 runners signed on, but we've got a couple of grade 1 winners in here and 3 runners from the Chad Brown stable. A lot of quality in this Hillsborough.
Yeah, I'll be honest, when Dan Illman sent us the rundown for this week and which races we were doing, I kind of wasn't expecting a very strong field, but it didn't turn out that way. We have some really quality runners for grade 2.
Yeah, so those 3 Chad Brown runners include the 2 favorites on the morning line, Chantasara and Rouge. They are the 2 former grade 1 winners in this field, looking to get back to their top form in 2023. But really every horse in this field has a chance, as you can see from that pretty closely grouped morning line here. To make some sense of this race, let's start by taking a look at some features in Timeform US, beginning with the pace projector. And Craig, this is a race where I think tactics could really come into play because there's not that much speed signed on. We're not seeing that favors on or near the lead flag show up, but it does feel like a situation where the number 7 Scottish Star should be intent on trying to control things on the front end.
Yeah, I'm actually not sure why that's not showing up. I'm going to have to check on that and see why, because it seems like it should be. Scottish Star is an actual horse that uses her speed, not one that just is shown on the front end by default. So I think that could make her kind of dangerous in here. And it also makes it kind of questionable what the other riders are going to do and how close they're going to want to stay to her, because I think getting that first run could be pretty important.
There are 3 Chad Brown runners in here, and the least fancied of those would be the number 1 California Queen, who is the long shot in the morning line. And I mention her with regard to this pace projector because sometimes Chad Brown plays around with the tactics when he has multiple entries. And California Queen seems like she could be in here to help set a bit of a pace for the number 6 Chantasara. I know that they're shown flip-flopped on the pace projector with Chantasara in front of California Queen, but they've used California Queen's speed in the past, whatever speed she does have. So I'll be interested to see what kind of ride she gets in this Hillsborough. Let's also take a look at the Timeform US Finish Projector, one of the new features in Timeform US. And if you've been browsing DRFTVs on your desktop computer, you might have noticed that the Finish Projector is now accessible from the newly launched desktop version of Timeform US. We'll talk about that a little bit more in just a bit, but here you can see it also on the mobile device. And this is the Timeform US algorithm selecting the finish of the race based on the Timeform US data, pace projector, speed figures. And Craig, we show the morning line favorite, the number 6 Chantasara, as the pick to win.
We do, but as you can see here, it's pretty close. That's the one thing you couldn't see with the Timeform US power picks is Temple City Terror is right there with her, just maybe a half length behind.
Yeah, Temple City Terror also coming in with some speed figure power. And we're going to talk about all of these contenders as we dive into some of the race replays from these horses' most recent starts. And we'll begin with that morning line favorite, Chantasara, and check out her last race in the Pegasus World Cup filly and mare turf. That is her in those Michael Dubb silks closing down the center of the racetrack. She's going to run into a clear second here, Craig, but is not able to get too close to the winner, Queen Goddess, who was very good this day. She was a pretty dominant winner. It never really seemed like Chantasara was going to reel that one in, but pretty solid run off the layoff here. She had one start in 2022, the second half of 2022, also coming off the layoff. So Chantasara has had trouble putting races back to back, but when she does show up, she typically puts forth a good effort.
Yeah, she generally runs well. We can see just 3 back. She was a length behind the Eclipse Award winner at Keeneland in the spring, and she had that long layoff afterwards. Didn't really show up in her return, but I thought she ran pretty solid in a race which was better than the grade 3, I believe. Queen Goddess is a very good horse who I think we're going to hear a lot from this year.
And that race actually got a slight speed figure downgrade. You can see, Craig, that P notation showing next to the speed figure, something that we've added over next to the speed figures recently. I know codes that you put into the PPs to kind of give some insight into how the speed figures were made. That Pegasus World Cup filly and mare turf featured a fast pace. The horses finished in fast time, almost too fast to be believed based on the runner's prior form coming into that race. We did see one run back from that affair, Lady Rockstar, come back to disappointed Gulfstream last weekend. So maybe that makes me question the form of that race just a little bit, but obviously we need some more evidence, and Chantasara has certainly run speed figures up to that level in the past. Let's move on to Chad Brown's other runner, Rouge, who was also a former Grade 1 winner. And we'll check out her last race in the E.P. Taylor Stakes at Woodbine. And that is her coming into the stretch and about second to third to last. She has a lot of work to do, but has that long stretch at Woodbine to work with. And she is able to grind down the leaders to just get up here for a neck victory. She had some trouble on the far turn, so it's not like she had a perfect trip getting this win, but she did make an unencumbered run through the stretch to get there in the final quarter mile of this race. Though, Craig, this is one of those grade ones that maybe is a grade one in name only. Didn't get a speed figure as high as some of those that we've seen Chantasara running. And Rouge in general has been a little bit of a disappointment in North America.
Yeah, she has. It was a grade one in name only. This was actually her last win. She ran in the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Turf, although I used the term run lately because she didn't really do much running that day. She only got a 118 speed figure in the Taylor. Even worse, the race rating that day was just a 113. So clearly not below. And I just wonder if her reputation's not a little bit overblown due to that grade one status.
Let's move on to another horse that has run some faster Timeform US speed figures, and that is the number 3 Temple City Terror. We'll take a look at her last race in the Long Island, a race that she also exits along with the number 1 California Queen. Temple City Terror was the winner of this race, and this was going a longer distance, 1 mile and 3/8, and that really has been Temple City Terror's specialty. She is a marathon runner who likes to go those 11 and 12 furlong distances. She'll be cutting back to the 1 mile and an 1/8 off the layoff, Craig. And it's been a little bit of time since she's gone a conventional route distance, 1 mile and a 16th, 1 mile and an 1/8. She might have just improved overall as a horse, though, since she last tried these shorter distances.
Yeah, I agree. It's a tough call with her. Was it the distance that made her improve, or was it the just getting better over time? The last couple of times she's run shorter than that 1 mile and a 3/8 hasn't gone particularly well. So I'm not sure what to make of her. I would let the odds be my guide. I'm not sure we're going to get the 6-1 morning line that what we see. It feels like to me she's going to get bet a little bit heavier than that off of those 2 graded stakes wins. But I'm kind of lukewarm on her because of the distance. I tend to think she wants more ground.
With a couple of high-profile Chad Brown runners in here, I wonder if that morning line could hold up. She's coming out from some different barn, Brendan Walsh, and I think a lot of people are going to view her the way you do, Craig, that she's better going longer distances, and that might be the case. But she is a horse who has really improved quite a bit through her 6-year-old and now starting her 7-year-old season, a horse that is definitely peaking late in life. The other horse that's coming out of that Long Island is the number 1 California Queen, and Craig, I don't really view her as a contender in this race, but do you think my idea is crazy that she could potentially be used as one of the speeds in here? I know she doesn't look that fast on paper, but otherwise I'm just kind of wondering why she's in this race.
I agree with you totally. I think this is why she's in the race. I don't think she's good enough to win a race like this, but we have seen her put on the lead a few times to perhaps help some other Chad Brown entries. And in this case, I don't think it's just Chantasara. I mean, you could say the same thing for Rouge as well. She might have even less speed than what Chantasara does and really needs some pace to close into.
Let's move on to the local prep for this Hillsborough, which was the Endeavor run a month ago at Tampa Bay Downs. And we'll check out the replay of that race, which features Surprisingly and Scottish Star. Surprisingly was the mild upset winner of this race. She went off at 7-2 and makes this big late run to catch Scottish Star on the wire. Craig, though, while this was a grade 3 and she's moving up to a grade 2, to me it feels like the jump is even bigger than that because there are some legitimate grade 1 and grade 2 level horses in this race, and didn't feel like that was actually the case with the Endeavor last time.
Yeah, we mentioned Rouge and kind of coming out of a race we don't really feel is a grade one, but I still think she's a pretty good horse and better than the grade three level. We've talked about some of the others in here. Just based on speed figures and the Timeform US race ratings, it does seem like this is a couple jumps up the class ladder. So, particularly, we'll talk more about Scottish Star in a minute, but of the two, I don't like surprisingly at all in this spot.
Yeah, surprisingly got an absolutely perfect trip last time. A great ride from Paco Lopez to just barely get the job done. She's going to have to improve again. Is going out for a trainer, Chick McGahee, that does tend to get horses to improve over time and later in life, but she's going to have to take that next step forward. As for the number 7 Scottish Star, Craig, I think your hope with her is that the race kind of falls into her lap and she's able to set those slow fractions on the front end, doesn't get too much pressure from a horse like the number 1 California Queen, because on paper, she's not quite good enough to win this race, but we've seen many times before the trip can certainly make up that difference.
Right, and that's why I prefer her to surprisingly, just because maybe she could steal the race on the front end. It's hard to envision a race where surprisingly could outkick the Chad Brown closers late, but you could envision a scenario where Scottish Star just gets away, California Queen isn't able to keep up, and she just has a lot left entering the stretch and maybe runs a little bit above her head.
One more horse to talk about, and I think it's a horse that does deserve some consideration in this race, and that's the number 5, Gam's Mission. She last ran all the way back in June of 2022, so she's coming off of a substantial layoff into this Hillsborough Stakes, but her last victory, Craig, was pretty good. That length and a half score in the Mint Julep over Delica, who went on to do some nice things in the summer and second half of the season last year. So that 119 Timeform US speed figure certainly stands up to scrutiny, and Gam's Mission seemed like a horse that had really hit her stride during her 4-year-old season. I don't know what has kept her away from the races for so long, but with just that continued natural progression, she's a contender in this race.
I think she is as well. She's also one off of a long layoff before. You won't see it on our screen, but if you scroll back in her PPs, her second career start had one of those red lines right before it. Her speed figures are certainly competitive in here. Don't know what happened, but I don't think it's a big deal. I think it's a good idea that Cherie DeVoe is spotting her so ambitiously. I think it's a good sign, and she's one that I think is really dangerous in here.
I'm a little wary of the rider assignment with Julien Leparoux. I know he sometimes can be a jockey that's somewhat passive on horses, especially in paceless races. And I think this is the kind of spot where you do want to use this filly's tactical speed a little bit to try to get some forward position, because they might not be going that quickly up front. But that's really my only reservation with Gam's Mission. And we'll check out a formulator fact for her trainer, Cherie DeVoe, that gives you some confidence on the trainer side of the human equation. Probably don't be worried too much, because Cherie DeVoe does very well off layoffs like this, extended layoffs over the past 2 years, nearly a 25% win rate with a healthy ROI. So she's definitely had success with horses like Gam's Mission before. Let's throw up our picks for this Hillsborough Stakes. And along those lines, Craig, that's where you're going to land. The number 5's Gam's Mission. And I really don't blame you. She's a horse that should be a decent price in this race and definitely has the speed figure credentials to be a major factor.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking for some value in here. I think it's not as direct as just going with the 2 Chad Brown horses. And one thing I didn't mention when talking about her is she's still just a 5-year-old. And we actually haven't seen her since early in her 4-year-old season. And particularly on turf, I think horses are still getting better as they move into their 5 and sometimes even 6-year-old season. So if she can improve on those speed figures we saw as an early season 4-year-old, I see no reason she can't be right there at the wire.
Yeah, I also have respect for Gam's Mission. She is my second pick in this race, but I did put the number 3 Temple City Terror on top. I feel like she's a horse that really is in career form right now and does have the layoff to deal with and the cutback in distance. But given some of the finishing speed we saw from her in her route races last year or marathon races, I think she might be able to handle this 1.1 distance. And I'm hoping she flies under the radar a little bit. I do want to get somewhere near that 6-1 morning line on Temple City Terror. So that's a look at the Hillsborough Stakes on Saturday at Tampa Bay Downs. Good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.